I am hearing the same number for Bitcoin over and over again. And that's somewhere in the 40s, that it's going to go down and bottom out in the 40s. And that's going to be your time to buy. And if you ask people when that's going to happen, it's going to happen in October of 2026. So wait until October 2026, buy Bitcoin in the 40s, maybe even the 30s, I don't know. And then get ready for multiple X's over the next few years. Wash, rinse, repeat. There's a problem with that. And I'm not saying that that's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but the problem is that there are a lot of indicators I can show you that communicate us to do a couple of different things. One, dollar wise, we are closer to the bottom than a lot of people are saying. But then two, timing wise, a bottom in the fourth quarter of this year doesn't quite make sense. So I want to show you three charts in this video that tend to support that thesis. Chart number one is much more of a local perspective, and that is the Bitcoin VIX chart, which you can see on the screen right now. Bitcoin VIX, it's really fascinating. Whenever the VIX gets elevated, you can see it's just within this channel. It's a logarithmic chart that you're seeing this on. But during times of extreme fear, when you see the VIX do some significant moves, what you'll tend to find is that Bitcoin actually finds a perfect bottom. You can see with the COVID crash in 2020, but then you fast forward to 2024, the Japan carry trade fiasco, the peak tariff fears, and then here we are in 2026, and we have this threat of World War III, the war with Iran. And so the VIX has gotten elevated over the last few days and weeks. And here we are with the bottom of this channel being reached, which provides a great opportunity for at least a local bottom. Now, if you think Bitcoin's going to the 40s and you want to remain steadfast with that, this doesn't necessarily disprove you, but it does, in my opinion, provide information as to the fact that Bitcoin has reached a local bottom, that it's going to go up from here, and maybe that rally is to a lower high before eventually making its way to the 40s. But on a broader scale, the other thing that I want to point out is Bitcoin's weekly RSI. If you look at a 1 week chart, which I have on the screen right now, and you look at Bitcoin's RSI on the weekly chart, what you'll see is that on the weekly, it's gotten lower than at any point since June of 2022. So what was June of 2022 for Bitcoin? That wasn't the bear market bottom, but that was a selling climax of sorts. That was the by far the biggest chunks of the losses had already been realized. And so that was the peak moment of the RSI dipping to its lowest point. And then in November of 2022, Bitcoin did go lower in price, but it gave us a very nice bullish divergence on the chart. And so could that be a scenario that we're in right now, where that move to $60,200 for Bitcoin was the peak of the selling of the realized losses on selling? And then we saw a weekly RSI bounce a little bit and then put in a higher low while the price went a little bit lower, maybe to the mid to lower 50s. And then that was the bottom for Bitcoin. But think about when that happened. And so we're about, if that is what's going to happen this time around, we are about 5 months ahead of schedule. And so that happened in January of 2026, where Bitcoin's RSI on the weekly chart got that low, first time since June of 2022. That's about 5 months ahead of schedule. And so is it going to take us until October or November of this year to put in that lower low and that bullish divergence? It seems unlikely to me. Now, the last chart that I want to show you is Bitcoin's 2-week Bollinger Bands. And throughout Bitcoin's history, moves below the lower Bollinger Band on the 2-week chart have marked periods of extreme market stress. And the way the market reacts afterwards has followed two different patterns. So if you look at 2018 and 2020, Bitcoin briefly moved below the band, and that marked the exact bottom. But then the 2015 bear market and 2022, Bitcoin first dipped below the band on the way down, followed by one final drop before the true cycle bottom formed. And that's what, if you go back to that RSI chart from earlier in this video, that's what I have in mind, is more of a true cycle bottom forming. But this first dip below the band marking something of significance. So again, 2022, that's the last time this happened. It dipped below the band on the first move, but then it followed one final move down before the true cycle bottom. And then here we are in 2026, and the price has once again moved below that lower band. So the question becomes, are we seeing another major bottom forming like 2018 and 2020? Or is this simply the first dip before the final low like in 2015 or 2022? But the thing that you got to understand, if it's the latter, if this is the second dip or the second to last dip, the penultimate dip, then the idea that the final dip would be a move more than about $20,000 down or $15,000 down, that doesn't quite make sense. That's too much of a dip. So unless there is some kind of a black swan event or something major happens fundamentally for Bitcoin, it would be reasonable to expect Bitcoin at worst to go to the 50s and not the 40s. Now, people who believe it's going to the 40s or the 30s, they have their reasonings. And if I'm wrong and it does go to the 40s, then fine. Whatever the case, it makes sense to me, with Bitcoin at least, to be DCAing and to be buying and waiting. Hopefully, the lower the better, honestly, for me right now, but waiting for potentially that final dip, or if it keeps rising, an acknowledgement that the bottom has already been in. You don't want to get sidelined. And the last thing that I'm going to say in this video is just, I want to remind you guys what it was like in 2022 and 2023. Do you think November of 2022 was the bottom? Do you think everyone realized it was the bottom in November of 2022? I can tell you with a great deal of certainty that no. A lot of people thought we were going lower, and that November of 2022 was not the bottom. And how long did it take for people to realize that November of 2022 was the bottom? You might be shocked by this, but it took a year. It took 1 full year of Bitcoin slowly grinding higher before people realized that November of 2022 was the bottom. And the thing that made people who were calling for Bitcoin to go lower to throw in the towel was a move up to $40,000 for Bitcoin. So if you want to mess around with this and wait for Bitcoin to go to the 40s, I do want you to know that you are taking a risk. You may not realize it, but you are taking a risk. And so just keep that in mind and invest wisely.